Toyota has more off-roaders than you can poke a stick at, but is the brand about to add another one to its ever-growing lineup? Could a mini Land Cruiser with the FJ moniker be closer than you think? I'm CarsGuide managing editor Tim Nicholson, and I'm here with CarsGuide news editor Don Tripolone and contributing journalist Andrew Chesterton. Boys, we're just going to get straight down to the point. Chesto, this car, is it a rumour? Is it actually happening? Is it a real thing?
Well, yeah, let's get stuck in. And look, like all things, like all stories that break in the automotive world, that's exactly the sequence that went down. It started as swirling rumors. Some international websites had picked up bits and pieces. It really solidified when Toyota in Australia trademarked the LandCruiser FJ name in Australia, suggesting that a model is certainly coming. And then now it's begun to take life with vehicles like the one behind me, which is the most Australian name I've ever seen attached to a vehicle, the Hilux Champ Wrangler. You couldn't be more Australian if you tried. Should be parked on Ramsey Street.
That is the best name. As somebody who has a redheaded brother, this name is really speaking to me.
Champ Wrangler, I could see one in his driveway. So I guess before we move on, I guess the big question is not so much whether it's coming. I believe it is coming. The real question is whether we want it, but we'll circle back to that in just a moment.
Excellent. And I guess, the name that's been swirling around, of course, seems to be the main one has been FJ. Now, there's obviously quite a bit of history, Dom, with that name in Toyota. I think you might even have one behind you.
I do. You can probably see the FJ40, and there's still a lot of these things running around Australian suburbs. There's a few parked in my suburb. And so there's that history behind it, right? And people love it. And so bringing back that FJ name means so much. And the reason we got there is because Toyota in Australia has actually trademarked the name Land Cruiser FJ, which, is a massive clue that there's a car coming in that name. They won't admit it, that there's anything coming, but it's silly not to, right?
Mm.
Exactly.
And there's also a bit more of a recent history with that name, I guess, Chesto, with the FJ Cruiser from a few years ago, which was a weird vehicle that didn't sell particularly well here from memory.
It didn't, but it has now achieved undeniable cult status. It's really weird how that works out sometimes. Wasn't mega popular at the beginning, perhaps a bit too confrontational, pushed the boat out a bit too far. And now it's a cult in Australia. It's hard to get your hands on one if you want one, and the prices are right up there. The only other thing I'd say about the FJ Cruiser moniker is that Toyota, if you remember the Tokyo Mobility Show last year, so 2023, I believe, they unveiled the Cruiser SE concept, which was kind of a smaller, lighter framed. In fact, I think that might be it behind you, Tim. IMVO concept, maybe it was, yeah.
Yeah, there's been a couple because they've done one. There's another electric cruiser concept that's a bit more luxurious looking or whatever, which is
that
something
is the SE cruiser. You're right.
That's the one. And that's a bit of a different vibe. This was the one they revealed when Akio did this weird thing a couple of years ago now, right at the end of the year, and they revealed like a room full of EVs, Lexus, Toyota, the whole kit and caboodle. And this thing, the compact cruiser concept, was one of them. And everyone was like, the color, the look, everything's like FJ Cruiser. You're calling it Cruiser. Come on, guys, what the hell's happening? This is an EV concept, though. So, yeah.
So interestingly, that's kind of where we're at the moment. So compact cruiser was the name I was trying to think of a minute ago. It's a stunning looking thing. I think that thing would fly off the shelves if they would ever launch it. So here's what we know so far. We know that the Hilux Champ is a cut price version of the Hilux that is sold largely in emerging markets, Thailand, Indonesia, India, the like. And then that is the same platform that is going to inspire the FJ Cruiser, at least one iteration of it. And I think the vehicle you can see behind me, this Hilux Champ Wrangler, is a SUV on top of a Champ Hilux that is going to form the basis of like a mini Fortuner that will enter into cut price markets, but probably not our own, not least of which because it is horrific to look at. And I just don't honestly, the angles and dimensions are all wrong. It just wouldn't sail here, I don't believe, in much the same way that the Hilux Champ wouldn't sail here either. So the latest word on the FJ Cruiser project is there's going to be multiple iterations of it. There'll be a cut price model for emerging markets. And then, like the concept you see behind us, there'll be hybrid, potentially plug-in hybrid, and eventually EV versions that'll arrive in markets like ours. So that's the car behind you, Tim, that I believe we're going to see in Australia in the coming years.
And I think Toyota's got history with this, Dom, where they kind of have multiple different vehicles for multiple markets. They're so big as a company that they can afford to kind of spin different vehicles off and go, this is going to go to an emerging market or whatever, or, others to come to us, like things like the Tacoma and Hilux and things like that.
Yeah, 100%. And it took us years to get a Corolla Cross here. Now that thing's one of the best sellers in its market. So they often like to try things out somewhere else. And if there's a demand somewhere, they've always got capacity to send it somewhere else. But they might trial, like Chesto said, cheaper version in emerging markets, make some money off that, and then higher spec, higher quality, different powertrains in one that they then send to Australia and America and the Mid East and things like that. But at the moment, it's all up in the air, but there's something there. We just don't know what it is.
Well, it's supposed to go into production in November, and it's supposed to be revealed at the beginning of next month. So we will see something next month, I'm sure of it. I think what that's going to be is the vehicle behind me rather than the vehicle behind Tim, but it will be the start of that snowball that'll eventually come to us. And look, if you look at vehicles like the Prado as a prime example, the LandCruiser 250 is a petrol hybrid in the States. In Australia, it gets that old 2.8 litre turbo diesel, albeit with a mild hybrid system attached to it. So it's not beyond Toyota to spin the same car with a ton of different powertrains for a ton of different markets. I mean, they are a global giant. They can do just about anything.
And it's pretty uninspiring. I was going to say, it's pretty uninspiring what's going to be in that Champ Wrangler as well.
Yeah.
It's just a bit of epoxy 2.4 litre diesel engine.
Yeah.
And that's not really going to fly in Australia for our tastes and what we need that car to do and what people want it to do. Everyone wants that, like heaps of towing. Everyone just wants that lots of torque, and that's just not going to do it.
Well, mate, that's the other thing that made us all get a little bit suspicious is they started talking about this new FJ model being significantly cheaper than a Fortuner. Now, Fortuner from memory starts around 53,000 in Australia. So you're talking about a car that starts high fours, basically. Now, we also know from Toyota that really nothing's getting cheaper in the Australian market. If you look at Prado 300 series, to crawl across anything really, nothing's going down the scale. So that suggests that the cheaper Fortuner variant is going to be for emerging markets because it's just not to our taste or specification requirements. So we'll have to wait a little bit longer to see what they might be able to produce for us.
And is the idea, Chesto, for something like this for Australia and whatever other markets are kind of similar to ours, it has to have off-road credentials. Would you be expecting this to be a ladder frame?
Yeah, so it's spun off the old Hilux platform, basically, which I think from memory is the IMVO platform, I believe. So that's the same thing that underpins the Champ. It's an older ladder frame platform that basically owes Toyota nothing. It is not the new ladder frame that underpins things like the Prado and the LandCruiser 300 series, and the TNGAF, which will eventually, I'm sure, underpin the new Hilux as well. So in a lot of ways, this is an opportunity for Toyota, I should say, to squeeze just a little bit more juice out of a platform now that I think is about 15 to 20 years old. So, and again, look, you can evolve platforms over the course of their life. So it's not, you're not literally blowing the dust off a 20-year-old platform, but it's been around a long time and it doesn't owe Toyota anything. And this might be one last roll of the dice before everything else moves to TNGAF.
I guess something like this as well, like Toyota, Dom, has so many niches, and again, in a lot of different markets, but no Jimny rival yet. I mean, is this kind of where we're going with this sort of thing?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Toyota's success is built on having a car for everybody. And we've seen the Jimny sell its socks off. There was waiting lists, over a year for this thing. And it's a pretty agricultural vehicle when you drive it. It's tiny. It's got nothing inside. It doesn't drive that well on the road, but it's amazing off-road. I think if Toyota could make a Corolla Cross size, tough full drive to license to print money, like that would have people lining up around the corner for that thing.
Mate, is it ever? And we know from the Suzuki Jimny, which you say is a little bit agricultural on road, which is underselling it ever so slightly. It drives like a tractor. But we know that doesn't bother people. Give it a bit of cool factor, give it a bit of off-road credibility, and people will put up with things in the city. In fact, I know people who've bought a Jimny and only exist in the city, never take it off-road, which is the definition of madness as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, so it goes to show that they can really make some money on this thing if they get it right and they get it to market at the right price and specifically with the right look. Behind me is not the right look, in my opinion. Behind Tim, that's getting much closer.
And like, if something like this comes to pass, the one behind me, so that again was an EV concept. I mean, again, thinking specifically about the Australian market, because it does sound like there's going to be a lot of different variations of these kind of models. Where are we at, do you think, Chesto, with Australians accepting like a rugged, capable little off-roader that happens to have an electric powertrain?
I think we're 11 billion light years away from that, Tim, for whatever reason. I just don't think that's the market at the moment for this car. I think there'd be a handful of diehard EV evangelists who would absolutely love that concept, but that's not the volume Toyota's looking for. It's also probably not the price Toyota's looking for once you start fitting expensive batteries and everything else. I do think where we're at as a nation, and Toyota's proven this with everything but the Hilux, is petrol hybrid is going to be the future of just about everything that we drive in our country, and it will be the future of this, at least a stepping stone anyway, before we eventually get to an electric model.
I know there's been a bit of a change in kind of direction and policy, Dom, with Toyota. Obviously, they were so focused on, plugless hybrids for so long, but slowly over the years, they've kind of gone, oh, okay, maybe plug-in hybrids are a thing. So it sounds like this could happen as well for this.
Yeah, exactly. Like they sell a plug-in hybrid version of the RAV4 in the US. There's a plug-in hybrid version of the Crown in Japan. They got the technology, but there's also rumors of them teaming up with BYD to grab their new plug-in hybrid tech, which is, sounds amazing. It's got over 100 kilometers of range. It's got that's EV only range. And that's the thing, if someone's done all the work for you, you can just pay to plug it back into your cars and you can get it around, you can get it turned around a lot quicker. And thing is, that kind of tech would work well for an off-roader because you got that electric motor with a bit more grunt that can then do the rock crawling in electric only mode, which is great because it's so torque heavy. It works really well at low speeds. But if it's going to happen, we'll have to wait and see, I suppose.
Matt, I'd only add to that if it is a bit agricultural in the city too, having an EV only range would revolutionize it because it would be so the power would be smooth and constant and easy in the city. And then you could activate everything you needed when you went off road. So it would just change the way you live with that car entirely. But I got to say, if you had told me 5, 10 years ago, even let's say 5 years ago, that Toyota, this absolute giant of the automotive world who has pioneered everything they've ever done from hybrid to hydrogen, was going to be borrowing plug-in hybrid tech from a relatively newish Chinese company to power their models, I would have said you're crazy. It's amazing how quickly the world's changed.
That's wild, isn't it? And by the way, if you want to check out what that technology is like, check out Byron's review at carsguide.com.au of the new BYD Shark 6. He goes into all the detail there. But back to Toyota, of course, this vehicle, Chesto, I mean, it has to have a certain look, as you said. But is there much point in kind of sticking with the retro vibes that we saw of the FJ Cruiser from a few years ago, or should they kind of take it in a bit more of a modern direction and go, all right, yes, it's got history, but it doesn't have to look like it's from history?
I don't think so. I think it's going to look a bit retro. And the reason being, Toyota could have named it anything. The LandCruiser Rock Crawler. They could have called it absolutely anything, but they have trademarked the name LandCruiser FJ, and I just can't help but feel like they've done that for a reason. There's got to be some correlation, right, between the FJ we know and the FJ we're going to see.
Yeah, and there's some form as well on that. Like, look at the new Prado coming out. That's going back to its roots, and everyone I talk to just can't stop. Like, they're frothing at the mouth for that thing. They love how it looks. And if it looks like the car behind you, Tim, with that retro cues, it's nice and chunky, big fat bumpers and stuff, who doesn't love that thing? It's going to kill it.
Yeah, 100%.
If they get the price right. And Toyota has been, has some form in shocking us a little bit with the sticker price on some of their newer models. But look, it has to come in under Prado, right? That's the idea. So we know there's an upper ceiling for where it's going to start. The question is, what's the lower ceiling? What's the floor? Where can they get this thing priced? Because if they do that right, it'll kill it. But if it's $40,000 more than a Jimny, it might not.
No, and that's going to depend on the size as well, right? In terms of positioning and how they're going to do it. But it has to be quite a bit smaller. So what does that look like, Chesto? What starting price should they be aiming for?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question. Toyota can charge a Toyota premium. There's no doubt about that. And in fact, we've learned that through all their models over the recent years. And they have gotten much better at including equipment and safety stuff, whereas in the past, some of their models felt a little bit underdone compared to their Korean rivals, for example, in terms of cabin tech and that kind of stuff. So I would like to see it start with a 5, early 5s, I reckon. Entry level. early fives. If we're talking hybrid or plug-in hybrid, then of course it's going to be more expensive. But if they're rolling out that 2.8 litre diesel again, let's see it start with a 5, and I think they'll sell plenty.
Yeah, I guess with that in mind, Dom, where does that leave? Coming back to this conversation about the Fortuner, that model's very old now. It's not particularly well loved. I think we worked out that it's one of the slowest sellers in their catalogue. Do you think Toyota should bother with another Fortuner with the next generation on which it will be based?
Yeah, it's the black sheep of the family, isn't it? Like everyone walks straight past in the showroom, goes to a Hilux or goes to a Prado or goes to a Land Cruiser. It's kind of unloved. And I think, part of that reason is it drives like the Hilux, which isn't the best driving thing. And you kind of expect more in an SUV. But like Chesto said before, there is rumors that there's a mini Fortuner coming, and could this car be it? And that could be a chance for them to rebrand, and that's what the LandCruiser FJ might be. But then again, that could be a long bow to draw. But I think the Fortuner name now, not doing so well. Do they persist with it? Probably not. Or is it in need of a big makeover and a big rebrand? Maybe.
Yeah.
It all comes down to the new Hilux, I think, that you reckon. New Hilux is coming soon now. And if that has dramatically improved the on-road comfort and drivability, much like the Ford Ranger's done, then that does breathe new life into the Fortuner product. If it still feels, a bit ute, then perhaps not.
Well, I reckon they should just go back to the 4Runner name, which they still use in the States, I believe, North America. And that did have a history here briefly. So, I mean, I don't know. I think that would be, as you said, Dom, the Fortuner name just, it doesn't mean a lot here. So why not, again, delve back into your past and go something like that. But I mean, from all reports, it's especially on carsguide.com.au, that next Hilux is going to be a shed load more better than the current one, and it has to be. They know how well Ford's doing with the Ranger and how much more improved that was over the last one. So I think we can all agree that next Hilux is going to be.
And just the level of competition too, as we say, the Shark is redefining what a powertrain you can have. The Kia Tasman is, now a week or so away from its official reveal and on sale next year. So, mate, the competition has never been tougher. New Navara coming, new Triton coming. So, yeah, they really need to pull out all the stops here. And look, it's Toyota. It's one of their most important models. They'll do exactly that.
And I think for all these cars to make it big in the future, the next gen Hilux, this mini Land Cruiser becomes, they all need hybrid power as standard. That needs to be it. Otherwise, it's just not going to fly. We've got new emissions laws coming in that is going to make it prohibitively expensive to most people. So you've got to put hybrid in there. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
I mean, even Jeep's doing that with the Wrangler, which would be another kind of competitor of this, I guess. But that vehicle is quite expensive now. I think it starts around 70 or 80 grand. So
Toyota's been good with their premiums for hybrid. It's never that expensive. It's only a few $1,000s more than the petrol version. So if they can keep that premium, we're looking pretty good.
Yeah. Easy. So just to wrap up, boys, Chesto, you said we might be seeing something that could be the start of this rollout of vehicle in the next month or so.
Yes. So look, the heavy mail from a whole bunch of international sites in those emerging markets suggests that production on this model, whether it's known as an FJ, whether it's known as a mini Fortuner, whether it has an entirely new name like Champ Wrangler, whatever, let's hope not, but whatever it is to be called, it is going into production in November, according to all reports. So once that happens, of course, they won't be able to hide it. We'll learn a lot more about it. And we'll know then too, whether or not A, it's a car that we'd be interested in taking in Australia, or B, it's a car that can even spawn a car we'd be interested in taking in Australia. So all will be revealed soon enough. But I would say this, if it does turn out to be an emerging market, a Hilux Champ-based SUV like the one you see before me, then I would put money on the fact that is not the end of the story. We will see another completely different model further down the track that looks more like the one behind Tim, and that'll be the one we have our hand up for.
Nice. So it sounds like you're saying watch this space.
Watch this space. Absolutely. How long that space is remains to be seen. It might be only a couple of weeks. It might be a little longer, but we'll see.
We'll see. Well, the best way to watch this space is to keep an eye on carsguide.com.au for all the latest news and reviews, of course, but related to this car, there's going to be quite a lot more to the story. So we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us, Dom and Chesto. You boys take care of yourself.
Thank you.
And, Keep your eyes on carsguide.com.au, and we will see you again very soon.